The bully's knee smashed into the new kid's face with a sickening crunch, blood exploding across the asphalt as he collapsed unconscious. Everyone watching froze in shock as Marcus Rivera lay motionless behind the school buses, his nose shattered, blood pooling beneath his head. They thought they'd broken the quiet transfer student who never fought back. They had no idea they'd just awakened a champion fighter who'd been holding back for 8 years. When Marcus returned the next day, his face still swollen and bruised, something had fundamentally changed in his eyes. And Tyler Morrison and his crew were about to discover exactly what kind of mistake they'd made. Marcus Rivera walked through the doors of Westfield High School with his shoulders hunched forward, hoping to blend into the sea of unfamiliar faces. At 17, he was tall but lean, with gentle brown eyes that seemed to apologize for his very existence. His black hair fell across his forehead in a way that helped him avoid eye contact, and his worn jeans and faded t-shirt marked him as someone who didn't want to draw attention. Moving to a new town 3 weeks into the semester was never easy, but Marcus had done it so many times with his military father that he'd developed a system. Keep your head down, stay invisible, and wait for the next inevitable move. What none of his new classmates knew was that Marcus had spent the last 8 years training in mixed martial arts at various gyms across the country. His father, a decorated Marine, had insisted on it after Marcus had been severely bullied at his school in Colorado when he was 9. "Son," his father had said, "there comes a time when a man has to stand up for himself, but you need to know how to do it right." Marcus had thrown himself into the training with the dedication of someone who never wanted to feel helpless again. He'd earned his black belt in karate, became proficient in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and could box well enough to spar with men twice his age. But he'd made a promise to his father and to himself. He would only use his skills if he absolutely had no other choice. The hallways of Westfield High were typical of any suburban school, lockers lining the walls, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and the constant buzz of teenage conversation. Marcus found his assigned locker and began organizing his books, trying to memorize his schedule without looking as lost as he felt. He could feel eyes on him, the natural curiosity that came with being the new kid, but he kept his focus on his textbooks. Well, what do we have here?" The voice came from behind him, dripping with the kind of fake friendliness that immediately put Marcus on guard. He turned to see 3 boys approaching, led by a stocky kid with bleached hair and a smirk that suggested he enjoyed other people's discomfort. "I'm Tyler Morrison," the leader announced, his 2 friends flanking him like bodyguards. "This is Jake and Connor. We like to welcome all the new students personally." Marcus recognized the tone immediately. He'd heard it in 6 different schools across 4 states. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly, hoping to diffuse whatever was coming. "Marcus," Tyler repeated, drawing out the name mockingly. "That's a pretty fancy name for someone wearing Walmart clothes." Jake and Connor snickered on cue, and Marcus felt the familiar knot forming in his stomach. "You know, Marcus, this school has certain traditions, and one of them is that new kids need to earn their place." Marcus closed his locker and shouldered his backpack. "I'm not looking for any trouble. I just want to get to class." "Oh, but trouble found you," Connor chimed in, stepping closer. He was taller than Tyler, but thinner, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was trying to prove something. "See, we run this hallway, and we don't remember giving you permission to use it." The warning bell rang, and Marcus saw his opportunity. "I really need to get to first period," he said, trying to step around them. Tyler moved to block his path. "Class can wait. We're having a conversation here." Tyler's voice had lost its fake friendliness, replaced by something harder. "You seem like the kind of kid who thinks he's better than everyone else. Am I right, boys?" Marcus felt his muscles tense, the way they always did before a fight. He could see the angles, the positioning, The way Tyler was standing with too much weight on his front foot. He could drop him in 3 moves, probably faster. But he thought of his father's words. Violence should be the last resort, son. A real fighter knows when not to fight. I don't think I'm better than anyone, Marcus said evenly. I just want to go to class. See? He thinks he's better than us, Jake said, his voice getting louder. Other students were starting to notice the confrontation, forming a loose circle around them. Marcus felt the familiar shame wash over him as he realized he was about to become the center of attention in the worst possible way. The next few days established a pattern that Marcus knew all too well. Tyler and his friends made it their mission to make his life miserable. They'd bump into him in the hallways, always with a fake apology. They'd sit behind him in the classes they shared, kicking his chair and making comments just loud enough for him to hear, but quiet enough that the teachers couldn't prove anything. In the cafeteria, they'd accidentally spill things near his table, forcing him to move or sit in sticky messes. Marcus endured it all with the same quiet dignity he'd learned to perfect over the years. He ate lunch alone, walking the perimeter of the school grounds when the weather was nice, finding empty classrooms when it wasn't. He completed his assignments, participated in class when called upon, and tried to become invisible between periods. But invisibility was impossible when you were Tyler Morrison's target. The worst part wasn't the harassment itself. Marcus had developed thick skin over the years. It was watching the other students pretend not to see what was happening. Teachers would walk past as Tyler shoved him into lockers. Other kids would look away when Jake would accidentally trip him in the hallway. The entire school seemed to operate on an unspoken agreement that what happened to Marcus Rivera wasn't their problem. 3 weeks into his time at Westfield High, Marcus had mapped out every bathroom, empty classroom, and alternate route through the building. He knew Tyler's schedule well enough to avoid him most of the time, but the cafeteria remained dangerous territory. It was there, on a Tuesday afternoon, that things began to escalate beyond the usual harassment. Marcus was sitting alone at a corner table, trying to eat his sandwich and read his history textbook simultaneously when Tyler and his crew approached. The cafeteria was crowded, filled with the usual chaos of 400 teenagers trying to eat and socialize in 30 minutes. "Hey, Marcus!" Tyler called out loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "My friends and I have been talking, and we think you might be confused about how things work around here." Marcus looked up from his book, but didn't respond. He'd learned that engaging only made things worse. "See, we think you believe you're too good to hang out with us. That hurts our feelings, doesn't it, boys?" Tyler's voice was carrying across the cafeteria now, and conversations at other tables were stopping as people turned to watch. "Maybe he thinks he's some kind of tough guy," Connor added, his voice high with nervous excitement. "Maybe he thinks he could take us in a fight." Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks. This was exactly what he'd been trying to avoid. "I don't want any trouble," he said quietly, closing his book and starting to stand. "Sit down," Tyler commanded, his voice sharp enough to cut through the cafeteria noise. "We're not done talking to you." Marcus remained standing, his backpack in his hand. Every instinct he'd developed over 8 years of training was screaming at him to act, but his father's voice was louder. "A real man walks away from a fight if he can." "You know what I think?" Tyler continued, stepping closer. "I think you're just a coward. I think you talk big in your head, but when it comes down to it, you're nothing but a scared little boy who runs away from everything." The cafeteria had gone almost completely quiet now. Marcus could feel hundreds of eyes on him, waiting to see what he would do. His heart was pounding, but not from fear, from the effort it took to hold himself back. "I don't want to fight you," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. "Of course you don't," Tyler sneered, "because you know you'd lose, because you know you're weak." Marcus started walking toward the exit, but Tyler moved to block his path again. This time, Jake and Connor positioned themselves on either side, boxing him in. "Where do you think you're going?" Tyler asked. "We're having a conversation here." "The conversation is over," Marcus replied, trying to step around them. That's when Tyler made his first real mistake. He put his hands on Marcus's chest and shoved him backward. Marcus stumbled but didn't fall, his training helping him maintain his balance. The cafeteria erupted in whispers and gasps. "Ooh, looks like our new friend doesn't like being touched," Tyler said, grinning at his audience. "What are you going to do about it, Marcus? Are you going to hit me?" Marcus straightened his shoulders and looked Tyler directly in the eyes for the first time since he'd arrived at Westfield High. "No," he said simply. "I'm going to walk away." He turned and headed for the exit, ignoring the laughter and comments that followed him. As he pushed through the cafeteria doors, he heard Tyler call out, "That's right, run away like you always do, just like the coward you are." The humiliation burned in Marcus's chest as he walked quickly through the empty hallways. He found an empty bathroom and locked himself in a stall, his hands shaking with adrenaline and suppressed anger. He'd handled situations like this before, but something about Tyler Morrison was different. The kid wasn't just a bully, he was smart, calculating, and he seemed to understand exactly which buttons to push to cause maximum damage. Marcus pulled out his phone and considered calling his father, but he already knew what the response would be. His dad was deployed overseas, and even if he wasn't, his advice would be the same. Handle it like a man, son. Use your head, not your fists. The next few days were worse than anything Marcus had experienced before. Word of the cafeteria incident had spread throughout the school, and Tyler seemed energized by his public victory. The harassment became more frequent and more creative. Marcus would find his locker vandalized with permanent marker. His books would disappear from his desk, only to be found later stuffed in trash cans. Someone put a "kick me" sign on his back that he didn't notice until a sympathetic teacher quietly removed it after third period. But Tyler wasn't content with pranks. He seemed to understand that the real damage came from public humiliation, and he orchestrated increasingly elaborate scenes designed to make Marcus look weak and pathetic in front of as many people as possible. It was in the gymnasium during a mandatory assembly that Tyler decided to make his boldest move yet. The entire school was gathered on the bleachers, listening to a presentation about college preparation that no one really cared about. Marcus had deliberately chosen a seat in the back corner, hoping to avoid attention, but Tyler and his friends had positioned themselves strategically throughout the crowd. About halfway through the presentation, Tyler stood up and pointed directly at Marcus. "Hey, everyone," he called out, his voice echoing through the gymnasium. "I just want everyone to meet our new student, Marcus Rivera. He's been here for almost a month now, and he's really special." Hundreds of heads turned toward Marcus, who felt his face burning with embarrassment. The principal on stage was trying to regain control of the assembly, but Tyler was just getting started. "You see, Marcus here thinks he's too good to make friends with anyone," Tyler continued, his voice carrying easily through the gym. "And when we try to be nice to him, he just runs away like a scared little rabbit." "Mr. Morrison, sit down immediately," the principal commanded, but Tyler was playing to his audience now. "I just think everyone should know what kind of person Marcus really is," Tyler said, grinning broadly. "The kind who can't even defend himself against a girl." The laughter that erupted from sections of the crowd felt like physical blows to Marcus. He wanted to disappear, to sink through the bleachers and never emerge. But he forced himself to sit still, to not give Tyler the reaction he was looking for. The assembly ended with Tyler earning a detention and a lecture from the administration, but the damage was done. Marcus had been marked as a target not just by Tyler's crew, but by the entire school. He was now the kid who couldn't defend himself, the one who would always back down, the perfect victim. That afternoon, as Marcus was walking to his last class of the day, Tyler appeared beside him in the hallway as if they were old friends. "You know, Marcus, "I've been thinking about our relationship," he said conversationally. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." Marcus kept walking, not trusting himself to speak. "I mean, maybe I've been a little hard on you," Tyler continued. "Maybe we could be friends after all." They reached Marcus's classroom, and Tyler stepped in front of him, blocking the doorway. His expression had changed from fake friendliness to something much more dangerous. "But see, there's a problem," Tyler said, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Marcus could hear. "You embarrassed me in front of the whole school by walking away from me, and I can't let that slide." Marcus met his eyes, feeling something shift inside his chest. "What do you want?" "I want you to know your place," Tyler replied. "I want you to understand that I run this school, and you're nothing but entertainment for me and my friends." The bell rang, and students began filing into the classroom around them. Tyler stepped aside with a smile, but as Marcus passed him, he whispered, "This isn't over. Not even close." The breaking point came the following Friday afternoon. Marcus had made it through the entire week without any major incidents, and he was beginning to hope that maybe Tyler was losing interest. He was walking toward the exit, looking forward to a quiet weekend, when he heard someone call his name. "Marcus! Hey, Marcus, wait up!" He turned to see Tyler, Jake, and Connor approaching from the direction of the gym. There were still plenty of students around, heading to their cars or waiting for buses, but something about Tyler's expression made Marcus's pulse quicken. "We need to talk," Tyler said when he reached him. "I don't think we have anything to talk about," Marcus replied, adjusting his backpack and starting to walk toward the parking lot. "Oh, but we do," Tyler insisted, falling into step beside him. "See, I've been hearing some interesting rumors about you, Marcus. Some people are saying that maybe you're not as weak as you pretend to be." Marcus kept walking, but he could feel the familiar tension building in his shoulders. "Jake here thinks you might actually know how to fight," Tyler continued. "He thinks maybe you've been holding back on us. Is that true, Marcus? Are you some kind of secret tough guy?" They had reached the edge of the parking lot now, in an area that was partially hidden from the main building by a row of buses. Marcus realized too late that he'd been herded into a trap. "I don't want any trouble," Marcus said, the words feeling automatic at this point. "But trouble wants you," Connor said, positioning himself behind Marcus while Jake moved to his left side. "Here's the thing," Tyler said, his voice taking on that familiar tone of fake reasonableness. "I'm tired of playing games with you. I'm tired of you walking away from me, tired of you acting like you're too good for us. So today, we're going to settle this once and for all." Marcus looked around and realized that the few students who were still in the area were deliberately looking away, unwilling to get involved. He was completely on his own. "I don't want to fight you," Marcus said again. But this time there was something different in his voice, an edge that hadn't been there before. "Good," Tyler said with a grin, "because this isn't going to be a fight. This is going to be a lesson." Without warning, Jake grabbed Marcus's backpack from behind, yanking him off balance. As Marcus stumbled backward, Connor grabbed his left arm, holding him in place. Tyler stepped forward, his face inches from Marcus's. "You see, Marcus, every school has a pecking order, and you've been confused about where you fit in that order. Let me help you understand." Tyler drew back his fist, but instead of punching, he grabbed Marcus by the front of his shirt. "You're at the bottom, Marcus. You're nothing, you're nobody, and it's time you learned that." With a sudden, vicious movement, Tyler drove his knee upward directly into Marcus's face. The impact was devastating. Marcus felt his nose crunch, felt blood explode across his face, felt his vision go white with pain. Jake and Connor released him, and he collapsed to the asphalt, his head bouncing off the ground with a sickening thud. The world went dark. Marcus came to slowly, his head pounding and his face feeling like it was on fire. He could taste blood in his mouth, could feel it dried and crusted on his lips and chin. His nose was definitely broken, swollen and throbbing with each heartbeat. But worse than the physical pain was the memory of what had happened, the image of Tyler's triumphant face as his knee connected with Marcus's skull. He was lying on the asphalt behind the buses, alone. The school parking lot was nearly empty now, most students having gone home for the weekend. Marcus sat up slowly, his head spinning, and looked around. There was blood on the pavement where his head had hit, and his shirt was stained red. He felt his pocket for his phone and was relieved to find it still there, though the screen was cracked. As Marcus struggled to his feet, something fundamental shifted inside him. The careful control he'd maintained for 8 years, the promise to his father, the determination to handle things peacefully, it all crumbled in an instant. Tyler Morrison had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He'd humiliated Marcus in front of the entire school, but more than that, he'd physically attacked him when he was defenseless, held by his friends like a prisoner. Marcus wiped the blood from his face with his sleeve and began walking toward the school building. His movements were different now, purposeful, predatory. The gentle, apologetic posture he'd carried for weeks was gone, replaced by the confident stride of someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. He found Tyler exactly where he expected to, in the gymnasium, shooting baskets with Jake and Connor. The three of them were laughing about something, probably reliving their victory over the pathetic new kid. Marcus stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them, calculating. "Tyler," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty gym. The three boys turned, and their expressions shifted from amusement to surprise to something approaching concern. Marcus's face was a mess, dried blood, swollen nose, a cut on his forehead from where he'd hit the pavement. But it was his eyes that made them take a step backward. Gone was the quiet, defeated look they'd grown accustomed to. In its place was something cold and dangerous. "Marcus," Tyler said, trying to regain his composure. "You look like hell, man. You should probably go see a doctor or something." Marcus stepped into the gymnasium, letting the door close behind him with a loud clang. "We need to finish our conversation from earlier." Jake and Connor exchanged glances, suddenly uncertain. There was something different about Marcus now, something that made their usual tactics feel inadequate. "I think we finished that conversation already," Tyler said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Maybe you should just go home and clean yourself up." Marcus continued walking toward them, his footsteps echoing in the empty gym. "You know, Tyler, you were right about something. I have been holding back. I have been pretending to be weaker than I am." He stopped about 10 feet away from them, just close enough to see the confusion in their eyes. "See, I made a promise to someone important to me that I would only use my training if I absolutely had no other choice. I've been keeping that promise for 8 years, through 6 different schools, through bullies just like you in every single one of them." Tyler's bravado was cracking now. "Training? What are you talking about?" Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. 8 years of mixed martial arts training, Tyler. 8 years of learning how to break people who deserve it, and you just gave me no choice. Without another word, Marcus exploded into action. Tyler, despite his size advantage, was completely unprepared for the speed and precision of the attack. Marcus's first punch landed square on Tyler's solar plexus, dropping him to his knees and leaving him gasping for air. Before Jake and Connor could react, Marcus had spun and delivered a devastating kick to Jake's midsection that sent him sliding across the polished gym floor. Connor, the tallest of the three, tried to grab Marcus from behind, but Marcus ducked under his arms and came up with an elbow strike that caught Connor in the ribs. The impact made a sound like a baseball bat hitting a tree, and Connor doubled over in pain. Tyler was trying to get back to his feet, his face red from lack of oxygen, when Marcus grabbed him by the front of his shirt, the same way Tyler had grabbed him earlier. "You want to know what the difference is between us, Tyler?" Marcus asked, his voice deadly calm. "You fight like a coward. You attack people who can't defend themselves. You gang up with your friends. You sucker punch people when they're not looking. He lifted Tyler off the ground with one hand, demonstrating a strength that belied his lean frame. I fight like someone who's been trained by the best, someone who knows exactly how much damage to do to make a point without crossing the line into something that can't be taken back. Marcus threw Tyler backward, and he landed hard on the gym floor, sliding several feet before coming to a stop. Jake was trying to crawl toward the exit, but Marcus stepped over him, blocking his path. "Where are you going, Jake? I thought you wanted to see if I could really fight." Jake looked up at him with terror in his eyes. "Please, Marcus, we're sorry. We didn't know—" "You didn't know what? That I was a human being who deserved basic respect? That attacking someone when they're helpless is the act of a coward?" Marcus reached down and grabbed Jake by the collar, hauling him to his feet with frightening ease. "Let me show you what it feels like to be helpless." With a quick movement, Marcus swept Jake's legs out from under him and controlled his fall, slamming him to the ground in a move that looked effortless, but required years of training to execute properly. Jake lay there, gasping, the wind knocked out of him completely. Connor was still doubled over, clutching his ribs and making small, whimpering sounds. Marcus approached him slowly, like a predator sizing up wounded prey. "Connor, right? You were always the loudest one, weren't you? Always so eager to join in when Tyler was humiliating me." Connor looked up at him with tears in his eyes. "Please don't hurt me anymore. I think you broke my ribs." "They're not broken," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "If they were broken, you'd be unconscious from the pain, but they're definitely bruised, and they're going to hurt for weeks." He grabbed Connor by the shoulders and lifted him to his feet, holding him steady. "I want you to remember this feeling, Connor. I want you to remember what it's like to be completely at someone else's mercy, because that's how you made me feel every single day for a month." Marcus released him, and Connor collapsed back to the floor, unable to support his own weight. Tyler was finally getting his breath back, and he was staring at Marcus with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You're crazy, man. You're completely insane." Marcus walked over to him, his movements controlled and purposeful. "No, Tyler. Crazy would be if I did to you what you've been doing to me. Crazy would be if I humiliated you in front of the entire school, if I made your life miserable every single day, if I attacked you when you were defenseless." He knelt down beside Tyler, bringing his face close enough that Tyler could see the dried blood on his nose and the cold fury in his eyes. "I'm not crazy, Tyler. I'm just done pretending to be weak." Marcus stood up and looked around the gymnasium. Jake was still on the ground, holding his stomach and breathing hard. Connor was leaning against the wall, clutching his ribs and trying not to cry. Tyler was sitting on the floor, looking up at Marcus like he was seeing him for the first time. "Here's how this is going to work," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the empty gym. "Starting Monday morning, things are going to be different at this school. You're not going to look at me. You're not going to talk to me. You're not going to acknowledge my existence in any way." He walked over to where Tyler was sitting and crouched down again. "If you ever, and I mean ever, try to bully me or anyone else in this school again, I will finish what we started here today. And trust me, Tyler, you don't want to see what that looks like." Marcus stood and walked toward the gym exit, leaving the three of them to contemplate their new reality. As he reached the door, he turned back one more time. "Oh, and Tyler, next time you want to knee someone in the face, make sure they don't know how to break every bone in your body with their bare hands." The door slammed shut behind him, leaving the gymnasium in complete silence, except for the labored breathing of three very humbled bullies. Monday morning at Westfield High School was unlike any other day in the school's recent history. Word of what had happened in the gymnasium had spread over the weekend, carried by the few students who had witnessed Marcus walking through the parking lot with blood on his face, and the inevitable gossip network that exists in every high school. Marcus arrived early, as was his habit, but this time he walked through the hallways with his head held high. His nose was still swollen, and he had 2 black eyes from Tyler's knee strike, but he wore his injuries like badges of honor. Students who had ignored him for weeks now stared openly as he passed, whispers following in his wake. Tyler, Jake, and Connor were already at school, huddled together near Tyler's locker like wounded animals. When Marcus walked past them, none of them made eye contact. Tyler's usual swagger was completely gone, replaced by a nervousness that was obvious to anyone who looked. Jake walked with a slight limp, favoring the side where Marcus had thrown him to the ground. Connor kept one arm pressed against his ribs, wincing with each step. The first real test came in the cafeteria at lunch. Marcus entered with the same confidence he'd displayed all morning, but inside he was curious to see how the social dynamics would play out. He got his food and looked around for a place to sit, expecting to find the same empty corner table he'd occupied for weeks. Instead, he found something completely different. A girl named Sarah Martinez, who he'd noticed before but never spoken to, waved him over to her table. "Marcus, come sit with us." As he approached, he realized that she wasn't alone. There were 5 other students at the table, all of whom he recognized as people who had been victims of Tyler's group at various points during the year. "We heard what happened," Sarah said as he sat down. "It's about time someone stood up to those jerks." "They had it coming," added David Kim, a sophomore who Tyler had been tormenting since the beginning of the school year. "Tyler's been ruling this place like some kind of king, and everyone was too scared to do anything about it." Marcus looked around the table, surprised by the warmth of their reception. "I didn't do it for anyone else," he said honestly. "I just got tired of being pushed around." "That's what makes it even better," Sarah replied. "You didn't set out to be a hero, but that's exactly what you became." From across the cafeteria, Marcus could see Tyler's table. The 3 boys were sitting alone, their usual crowd of followers and hangers-on conspicuously absent. Other students were giving them a wide berth, as if their former status as the school's top bullies had been replaced by something resembling pariah status. As the days passed, the shift in the school's social ecosystem became more and more apparent. Students who had been afraid to walk certain hallways were now moving freely through the building. Kids who had eaten lunch alone in empty classrooms were joining tables full of friends. The atmosphere of fear that Tyler and his crew had created was evaporating, replaced by something healthier. Marcus found himself in an unexpected position. Students who had never acknowledged his existence were now greeting him in the hallways. Teachers who had seemed oblivious to the bullying that had been happening under their noses were now more attentive to the social dynamics in their classrooms. The administration, clearly aware of what had happened, seemed content to let the new status quo establish itself without interference. 2 weeks after the confrontation in the gymnasium, Marcus was walking to his car after school when he heard someone call his name. He turned to see Tyler approaching alone, looking nervous and uncertain. "Marcus, can I talk to you for a minute?" Marcus stopped and waited, curious to see what Tyler had to say. "I wanted to apologize," Tyler said, the words coming out in a rush. "For everything. For the bullying, for humiliating you, for what I did to you in the parking lot." Marcus studied Tyler's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but all he saw was genuine remorse. "I know sorry doesn't fix anything," Tyler continued. "I know I can't take back what I did to you, or to other people, but I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what it feels like to be powerless, to be afraid." "Do you?" Marcus asked quietly. "Yeah," Tyler nodded. "I do, and I hate it. I hate feeling like everyone's looking at me, waiting for me to screw up. I hate being afraid to walk through certain parts of the school. I hate eating lunch alone because nobody wants to sit with me anymore." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing Tyler's words. "You know what the difference is between us, Tyler?" What? I was afraid because you made me afraid. You chose to make my life miserable because it made you feel powerful. But you're afraid now because of the choices you made, because of the person you chose to be. Tyler's shoulders sagged. I know, and I can't figure out how to fix it. Maybe you start by figuring out why you needed to hurt other people in the first place, Marcus suggested. Maybe you start by making amends to everyone you've bullied, not just me. Would that work? Would that make things better? Marcus shrugged. I don't know, but it's better than just feeling sorry for yourself. Tyler nodded slowly. You're right. I need to do better. As Tyler walked away, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. He'd gone from being the school's favorite victim to someone who commanded respect through strength, but he'd tried to do it without becoming the very thing he'd been fighting against. The final week of school brought an unexpected development. Marcus was in the library studying for finals when the principal, Mrs. Henderson, approached his table. Marcus, could I speak with you privately for a moment? They walked to her office, and she closed the door behind them. Marcus wondered if he was finally going to face consequences for the gymnasium incident. I want to talk to you about what happened with Tyler Morrison and his friends, Mrs. Henderson said, settling behind her desk. Okay, Marcus replied, unsure of what was coming. I know what they did to you was wrong, she continued. I know that we, as a school, failed to protect you from their harassment. And I know that you eventually felt you had no choice but to take matters into your own hands. Marcus remained silent, waiting for her to continue. What I want you to know is that while I can't officially condone violence, I understand why you did what you did. And I want you to know that the atmosphere in this school has improved dramatically since that day. She leaned forward in her chair. Bullying incidents are down by 70% from where they were a month ago. Students are reporting feeling safer, more comfortable. Teachers are saying their classrooms are more positive environments. Marcus was surprised by this information. I didn't think it would make that big a difference. Sometimes it only takes one person willing to stand up to change everything, Mrs. Henderson said. But I want to make sure you understand something important. What you did worked in this specific situation, with these specific people, at this specific time. Violence isn't always the answer, and it can often make things worse. I know, Marcus said. My father taught me that. He taught me that fighting should always be the last resort. It sounds like you have a wise father. I'd like to meet him sometime. He's deployed overseas right now, but he'll be back for graduation. Mrs. Henderson smiled. I look forward to it. In the meantime, I want you to know that you have a place here at Westfield High. You've earned the respect of your classmates and your teachers, and I hope you'll consider this your home for as long as you're here. As Marcus left the principal's office, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. He'd started the school year as a victim, someone who absorbed punishment and tried to disappear. But he'd learned that sometimes disappearing isn't possible, and sometimes the only way to earn respect is to demand it. The final day of school was warm and sunny, with students gathering in the parking lot to exchange phone numbers and make plans for the summer. Marcus was loading his backpack into his car when Sarah Martinez approached him. So, are you sticking around for senior year, or is your family moving again? We're staying, Marcus said. My dad's going to be stationed here for at least 2 more years. Good, Sarah smiled. I think Westfield High is a better place with you in it. As Marcus drove home that afternoon, he thought about the lessons he'd learned during his time at Westfield High. He'd learned that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to show them that you're not afraid to fight back. He'd learned that respect isn't given freely. It has to be earned, sometimes through actions that you'd rather not take. But most importantly, he'd learned that being strong doesn't mean being cruel, and that using your power responsibly is just as important as having power in the first place. Tyler Morrison and his friends had learned that lesson the hard way, but they'd learned it. And maybe, Marcus thought, that was worth something. He pulled into his driveway and sat in his car for a moment, looking at the house that would be his home for the next 2 years. For the first time since arriving in this town, he was looking forward to tomorrow. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.